What's up, family? What's up, family? It's your boy, Pastor Ramon, aka Pastor Ray, and you are encountering the well. This is June 9th, Thursday evening, 8:15 or 8 we might be a little later than that at this point. But 8:19 p.m. and you are part of the well encounter. Listen, so what I love for you to do before we even get started, if you're here, make sure you comment, let us know that you're watching with us and that you're on with us. If you're on YouTube, if you're on Facebook, whatever that looks like, let us know that you are in the place to be, that you are in the encounter with us, and that you are here. And then take a moment like this if you're on Facebook, and then share it. Share it with your friends and your family, no matter where you're watching from. Share the link, share it on your Facebook page, text it to somebody. Nonetheless, just share it. Just share it with somebody. Yo, this is an amazing night. I'm so glad to be with you guys. In the month of June, we have like a crazy encounter this evening. We are wrestling with the theme, Jesus in these streets. Jesus in these streets. Absolutely crazy theme for the month. And then the topic, are you ready? Is Jesus in jail? Is Jesus in jail? You see it right there, 6'9". Is Jesus in jail? And it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy because we're going to dive deep into this conversation tonight with some folks that have experienced Jesus in a way, experienced life and incarceration. It just, wow. It is, it is a crazy, crazy, crazy evening. Listen, now we always have a motto here at the well. We always say we like you to what? Encounter the well, become the well, emerge and share the well. Just like it's synonymous with Jesus. Encounter Jesus, become more like Jesus, emerge and share Jesus. Encounter love, become love, emerge and share love. That's our motto here, right? And we want everything that we do to lead you down in the right path. And here at the well, that right path is 5 words that begin with the letter P. All right. So everything that we do here at the well should lead you down the path to the 5 P's: passion, your purpose, your promise, your peace, and your power. Let me say it one more time: your passion, your purpose, your promise, your peace, and your power. Every encounter that we have, we wanted to lead you down the road to one of those 5 P's. Now, major announcement, major announcement, major announcement. You all know Kim B. Miller, who was our director of arts. She is still a part of our squad, and we love her so much. She is one of the dopest poets, spoken word artists that we know. But we do have a new person in town who is taking over the reins. Kim B is still with the squad, but she stepped down from that position because Kim B is in such high demand. All right, so she is everywhere, but she is still very much in tune and a part of the squad here at the well. But we have a new director of arts whose name is Dominic, and he goes by the stage name of Nerd the Poet. So you'll be seeing a lot more of him. He'll be on to introduce himself in the upcoming weeks, but a super amazing thing with us. And so he is now working to make sure that we have a featured artist of the month. And speaking of a featured artist of the month, we have one tonight. Yes, indeed, we have one tonight. His name is Jeffrey Big Homey Banks. He goes by the name Big Homey. Listen, Jeffrey Banks is poetically known as Big Homey. Within the last year, Big Homey was the opening act for America's Got Talent champion Brandon Leak. He also curated virtual programming for the voice of the nationally syndicated radio show The Breakfast Club. Y'all know about The Breakfast Club. And Monday Night Football, Cayman Kelly. He's been featured in national media such as Essence Magazine, Sirius XM, Satellite Radio, Radio 1 Incorporated, the CBS Early Show, and Black Enterprise Magazine. Big Homie's album, Exposed, the EP, is the poetic and victories of a Christian believer. Over the pandemic, he's been published in numerous Day 8 poetry anthologies, including Fallen Leaves, an interfaith anthology on the topic of consolation and loss. This led him to being selected to have his poetry being selected for District of Columbia Public Schools curriculum in the publication DC Poets for DC Schools. Man, we're still talking about Big Homie. He became the poetry editor for Burgeon Magazine and co-edited the recent anthology, The Great World of Days. His work has also been published by the National Association for Poetry Therapy, District of Columbia Public Libraries, and the international poetry magazine Paris Lit Up. Big Homey had the opportunity to perform nationwide, including speaking at over 30 college campuses across the country. He's nationally recognized event planner who was named one of the top 40 under 40 Christian meeting planners in America by Rejuvenate magazine, an award-winning grant writer receiving numerous grants on arts and humanities east of the river, Family Strength and Collaborative, the Maryland State Arts Council, and Humanities Council, Washington, D.C. in 2021. I'm not through, y'all. He was teaching artist fellow with the DC Arts and Humanities Education Collaborative this year. He's instructing the 2022 Teaching Artist Fellow cohort. He facilitated a summer writing camp last year virtually and is leading the Day 8 writing camp at Shepherd Park Library this summer. He led poetry workshops for grade school students in DC, Maryland, New York. A poetry workshop at the University of Pennsylvania was done at the 2022 Association of Writers and Writing Programs Conference in Philadelphia. Later this year, he's producing the forthcoming poetry anthology, Diaspora Cafe. DC is the lead editor with Maritza Rivera. Oh my goodness. You guys are in for a treat. I'd like to welcome to the platform special guest, featured artist for the month of June, Jeffrey Big Homey Banks. What's up, Big Homey? What's up, sir? What's going on, brother? And I'm thinking he might be frozen. Well, you guys get at least to see who he is. All right, so we're going to skip just ahead. As you guys can see, we also have an amazing panelist of guests. Matt is on with us. My brother Samuel is on with us, and of course, Pastor Tay. Pastor Tay, I tell you what, why don't we just go ahead and you guys give a shout out to the folks real quick while I text Big Homey to make sure everything is cool with him.
Yeah. Hello everyone. No, Pastor Tay. Well, happy to be here. Shout out to friends and family, everybody who's watching on Facebook, YouTube, and Cyberland. Shout out. Hello, Matt. Matt's friend.
Hello, Pastor Tay.
This is a great subject. Can't wait to get started, and can't wait.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. It's great to be here with you all. I'm Matt Collinson. You've seen me a few times before, usually with somebody different next to me. Sam is a good friend, but not to be confused with my wife, Anna Chelsea, who's normally sat there next to me. I'm really excited for this topic. I think it's a really important conversation, and just really glad to be here. So shout out to everyone who's joining us online, and please, we want to hear from you. So let's hear what folks are saying.
Yeah, I definitely think this is one of those topics where, everyone's input is appreciated, right? Because everyone has a perspective, everyone has like a viewpoint, and I'm sure in some way it has affected more people than we dare realize, right? So, can't wait to really get that conversation going.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I let our brother sit, there we go. So, Big Homey, are you there? We have some movement, so I know you're there. Can you
Yeah,
hear us? Yes,
yeah, I
perfect,
can hear
perfect,
you.
perfect,
I can hear you
perfect, cool,
great.
awesome,
Yes.
awesome, awesome. So Big
Yeah.
Homey, I gave this great long introduction on you, brother.
No, I
So
heard the beginning of the introduction, then you froze, and I'm like, wow, why? Busy. So like, yeah. So I was
so
like, let me try and see, like, do I have to log on and go back off? And which is what I did, because I was trying to see if it was me or you. So prayerfully, it will stay up for these next few moments. So. Yes, hello everybody. So no, I heard the introduction. Thank you so much for everything. So yeah, I'm Jeffrey Banks, poetically known as Big Homie. Be before you for a few minutes. I heard a little bit of the dialogue as far as what they're gonna go into. So let's just get right into it. I've been publishing. I think you heard that a little bit in my intro. I think it froze by then. So a couple of short pieces and one piece kind of leading into Jesus in these streets, and just talking about that as far as this series. So the first thing is we have to have hope. I was part of the Hampton. This is faith. This is a faith anthology, and some of you have been to church. You're gonna hear a little bit of churchiness with this, but still, see the why with it. So hope is the first piece. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and his righteousness. You see, this hope is all that I have. When I feel that all hope is going to have to remember where my hope is built. I hope so I can encourage someone who does not know Christ. I hope so in darkness someone can see light. I hope because I cannot put my trust in Christ because he knows my plans. I hope because I know I have an expected end. I hope in Christ because my broken heart he mends. I hope so I can make it through the day. I hope because there's a debt that I cannot repay. God so loved the world that blessed hope was given. Christ is born, he was crucified.
All right. So I think Big Homie is having some technical difficulties. So as you can see, he was about to spit fire, and Big Homie is such an amazing, dope artist. So tell you what, we'll come back to him in just a few moments. Let's bring back in Matt and Tehran. You guys know sometimes we have those technical difficulties, and it's okay because we're gonna still rock through it anyway. But yeah, Amplify Network, can we bring back in uh yep, there we go. So we'll bring Big Homie back in just a few minutes, guys. I think we're having some technical difficulties. But tonight we have this great guy. So Samuel, and I want to call you Samuel Rain, so I apologize because we had an artist on. But Samuel Bugs, who's on with us. Man, why don't you just greet the people real quick, and then you have an amazing story that we want to share with people. So guys, if you're just tuning in, again, get yourselves a good seat. Get you a glass of wine or a beer or water, whatever you're gonna drink, and I promise you, you will not want to miss this conversation. But Sammy, why don't you just go ahead and introduce yourself to folks?
As has been said, my name is Samuel Bugs, and I feel privileged to be a part of this. I was born and raised in Washington, D.C. I'm currently 65 years old, but 25 of those years were spent in incarceration. So again, I feel a real privilege of being able to be with you this evening.
Yeah, and we're glad to have you. And I just want to give a shout out to Matt and Anna Chelsea. Folks, mark off your fourth Sundays because the Well is now doing some live stuff on the fourth Sundays of each month. We just had our first justice encounter that Matt and Anna Chelsea are in charge of our justice department, and it was super amazing. And it's what led me to ask Samuel to be back here again this evening. So, Sam, we thank you for taking more time to be with us on this important conversation, and we'll hop right into it. Matt, I mean, you also are really responsible for connecting us with Samuel. So whenever you feel like there's maybe more that we could expand on, it just hop in there. Tay, I know you've got some questions too. But Sam, you sort of talked about the fact that you were incarcerated. Can you share with us sort of that story? Why were you incarcerated? What led to you being incarcerated?
Well, I think actually there are possibly a number of things. My incarceration began at the age of 16. Probably 6 to 8 months prior to my incarceration, I began shooting heroin and bam at that time. But I really think the biggest thing as to what led to my incarceration, I believe, unfortunately to myself, peer pressure. It appeared that the information I was receiving from the street, from my so-called friends, became far more important than the lessons I was learning at home. And that eventually not only led to me shooting heroin and bam, but it also eventually led to my criminal activity. And that
Yeah.
incarceration lasted, as I said, I became locked up in 1973, 16 years old. I came home approximately 15 years later, September the 21st, 1987. So again, I went in when I was 16. When I came home, I was 30, almost 31 years old. And again, I'm like, truly blessed. Yeah, but
Yeah.
that's pretty much my belief. How I eventually became incarcerated. It was the last thing, actually, the last thing I thought about at the time. But it appeared the more of an influence my so-called friends had on me, the further I got away from the lessons I was learning at home. On either side of my family, I was the first one to become incarcerated, which of course became a real shock to my entire family. I still remember vividly. At that time, I was living in Landover, Maryland, and the police came as they normally come, early in the morning, banging and kicking automatic weapons. They eventually, when they were allowed into my home, they had automatic weapons surrounding my house, and yeah. But a lot of people. You probably heard in the past where a lot of people have been falsely accused of something. That's not my case. I committed 2 armed robberies, um, one in the state of Maryland and one in the District of Columbia. Eventually, I received 2 sentences, ran consecutive, which meant in order to begin my second sentence, I had to complete the first sentence. That led to me being down at Lawton Youth Center 1974 to 1976, when I was eventually paroled from there, and I went to the state of Maryland to begin a 20-year sentence I had there.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was
We
just
both
saying
said
the
that.
same thing myself. Wow. But again, that leads to the reason why I feel so blessed and privileged to be here this evening.
Yeah. Yeah.
You'll probably understand more once I go a little more into my story,
Yeah.
but
I
I
mean,
definitely feel honored and blessed.
yeah, I mean, and Samuel, so one, I'm appreciative of the fact that you're willing to share the fact, a lot of people don't own why they got to where they, what put them in the place that they were put to. So I'm so it's humbling to hear somebody right say no, like I absolutely did what I did. When you look back, um, and I'm running for mayor in my city, and I've been having all these conversations, right? And so people are upset with the young people who are out doing, the senseless gun drive-bys right now, and who are shooting. And who are just, a lot of people, like, they just don't have anything. They're just doing anything right now. And even some of the code that you saw back in the day, you don't see people protecting children, because it used to be you wouldn't shoot around children or seniors or stuff like that.
Yeah.
But you admit that you were on the wrong side of the tracks. What do you think for parents who are at home and thinking how what are young people thinking? Why are they not choosing the right thing? I know you can't talk for everybody, but my question would be, what made you not choose the right thing?
Well, as I said earlier, the influence of my so-called friends at that time. And I can still hear my mother telling me over and over again, boy, you don't have any friends. Because I would always come in the house, my friend this, my friend that. But my parents knew better than I at that time. And they realized that the guys that I were calling my friends weren't actually friends.
Yeah.
And again, their influence over me became far more greater than the influences I was receiving at home. Again, no one in my family on either side have been incarcerated. So I have that distinction in my family of being the only one, the first one. My brother, whom is approximately a year and 8 days younger than I am, he eventually followed my footsteps about 2 years after I became incarcerated.
Wow.
Wow. Well, I wonder if you don't mind me asking, but you as Pastor Ray was saying, we see the younger generation, some of the young generation who took the wrong path. Do you see
Mhm.
like yourself in them, like how you were when you were that age, and you see kind of the knucklehead things they're doing? And if so, do you find it that it's your place to maybe say something, or like
Mhm.
how do you wrestle with that situation when you see somebody doing the same things you did, knowing the path they're going down? Is that something where you try to reach out or?
Actually, it hurts me when I come across those situations where I see
Mm-hmm.
young people that look like me doing some of the things I was doing at their age. So I somewhat understand. I would like to think that I understand, but I definitely have empathy for their situation because I
Mm-hmm.
believe that young people today are confronted with far more possibly than any other generation that I can recall. There's so many things that they are confronted with today. A lot of those things weren't in existence when I was committing my crimes and my armed robberies. A lot of the things that they have to deal with today weren't in existence then. And I feel for them, but that's one of the reasons why I gladly agreed to doing this. Because man, somehow, some way, we have to reach them, the young people out there doing the things that we look down upon. And some of the things that I personally have noticed, and the unfortunate thing, a lot of them don't want to listen to anybody. I've heard a number of parents being afraid of their kids. That definitely wasn't the case. My mother was a little one. My mother was about 5'3", and man, she done came in crack houses looking for me and my sister, and uh, banging on the police door. Let my son out of there. That kind of a thing. But I always had a tremendous amount of respect for my parents, despite the fact that I wasn't listening to the lessons that they were attempting to grant me. I think if that is the case, that a number of people, I think people in general are afraid of a lot of young people today because of a lot of things that we see on the news, the random killings and that sort of thing. But if we don't do anything to aid them, to assist them, they will continue doing what they're doing. And we all sacrifice. We all are subject to the things that they do today. And it's hard to get mad if you aren't doing anything to prevent that. But they need all the assistance I believe that they can possibly get.
It's so interesting, brother Sam, because like I'm listening to you, and I think what stands out to me is that, yeah, I want to go back. You talked about your mom who was willing to
Mm,
come down. Look for, so when you say that, right, the thing that initially hit me is, okay, so his mother loves him because his mom
mm.
obviously cared about him, but yet you still chose to go down a different. So what, like, were you? Because I mean, and again, right, like this is, I believe that our platform can be freeing and informational for a lot of people.
Mm,
So many folks say, right, oh, they went down that road because they ain't get no love at home. But it sounds like you did get love at home.
mm.
So, what do, and I don't know, you might not know this, but what made you lean more towards the peer influence and less towards the love that you were receiving and the guidance you were getting from at home?
Well, I truly believe that one of the things I eventually began to understand once I got much older was about peer pressure. And prior to my acknowledgement of the importance and the part that it played in my own life, peer pressure, prior to that, I just thought it was just a lot of yin yang, just a lot of talk. Because at that time, I'm thinking, man, how in the world can someone sway you or convince you to do something that you may not want to do? But looking back, that was definitely my situation, man, because I did a number of things. I still remember jumping out of my second floor bedroom window, 11, 12 o'clock at night, just so I could meet up with some of those so-called friends. And we would go down at that time, Barnett's or 7th Street, because once again, I began shooting dope at that time. And it's just amazing how much influence, looking back, that they had on me.
Mm.
Man, again, my father worked 2 jobs. He worked for the sanitation department. He drove a DC Capital cab for 30 something years just to see that his family had the things that they needed, they desired. And my father worked so hard that in 1969, we moved from 37th Street Southeast to Landover, Maryland, in a 3-bedroom house in 1969. I didn't realize it then, but looking back on that now and thinking about the things that my father must have endured in order to maintain those jobs, and we're talking about in the late 50s and the early 60s. And then once I began to think about my father's predicament, I think about all the things he must have encountered during that time. Of course, if I had to do it all over again, my life would be entirely different. But that's not the cards we're dealt. But looking back
Yeah.
again, once again, man, it's just a number of things that I did, unbeknownst to my family. Because when the police knocked on my door, on our door that day, my entire family was completely shocked.
Wow.
It was the first time they had ever experienced anything like that. I mean, police all over the place, guns drawn. And that still has an effect on me today because I have a lot of regrets because of that and the things that I eventually had taken my family through. All during my incarceration and eventually my brother's incarceration, my family was trying wherever we just happened to be at that time to come and visit us.
Mm.
I actually feel ashamed that I took my family, my parents through the things I had taken them through. And again, if I had to do it all over again, they wouldn't have gone through the things that I've caused them to go through. And I'll carry that regret for the rest of my life. And since both of my parents have passed, I really didn't. I believe in spirits, so I believe that they're looking down and they see the things that I'm doing now. And I'm willing to say that because of them and my memories and how I let them down and deceived them, a lot of things that I do and don't do today is in remembrance of my parents.
I want to say, welcome back, Big Homie, with us. I'm Big Homie. Why don't you just stick on a little bit for the conversation? Chaz, Dr. Chaz Gibson is watching too. Brother Chaz, good to see you. We're talking with Samuel Bucks, who is talking with us about just his life story. Those who are just joining us again about we're talking about is Jesus in jail. We're about to get to this place where I want to ask him a question about that. But he's just sharing a lot about being incarcerated for years since he was 16, in and out of the system, and now at 65, sort of looks back at all that he went
Mm-hmm.
through. He talks about his drug use. He talks about peer pressure. Talks about right. He was in jail and admits that he committed the crime that put him in jail. And so I want to ask this question. This topic for tonight is Jesus in jail. What I've learned about you, Brother Samuel, is that you do have a spiritual connection. You do know who God is. So my question is, with all that you experienced in prison, um, with all the peer influence that you were under, right, with all the negative stuff, some kind of way Jesus still crept into your life. And and I guess my question is, how in the world were you under the influence of peer influence? You were committing crimes. You were jumping out your window to go do whatever at midnight, and some kind of way, right? Because a lot of people be like, "Oh, they just leave them alone." There, a lot of people just write you off. How did you experience God in this?
Well, you know what? It's strange that you asked because there were a number of ways, and I've been spiritual most of my life, and I say that to mean that I believed in God, but I wasn't really practicing any particular religion. I still remember living in Ivy City, and we lived probably about maybe 50 yards from a church. Every Sunday, whether or not we wanted to go, our parents seen that even if they didn't go, they seen that we was in that church. How I came upon it, again, I was sentenced in D.C. and Maryland. I received my 10-year sentence in Maryland first, and then I was allowed to go to Maryland for sentencing. Again, at this time, I was 16 years old. I received a 20-year sentence in the state of Maryland, and I still remember vividly. After leaving the courtroom, going back to Upper Marlboro Jail, I laid on my bed and I cried. I also began to pray because I had no idea what may have been ahead of me. But one thing I made a commitment to myself while crying, lying on my bed, that somehow, somewhere, I was going to survive whatever it was that was ahead of me. And there was a number of situations while I was incarcerated, because I've been stabbed on 3 occasions while incarcerated. The first time down Lorton Youth Center, I was stabbed in the head with a screwdriver. And fortunately for me, the screwdriver hit my skeleton. And I still have a tip of some metal in my head from the tip of that screwdriver breaking off. Now, sometimes later after that, I was kind of like pounding my.
Hold on, Samuel. I just hold on before we even move further, because I just want to make sure I get this right, because he says, "Fortunately for me," right? I just like the wording. You know what I'm saying, Pastor Tay? I just want to make sure I heard "fortunately for me," and
Yeah.
the screwdriver hit. Hold on, but like, just not to skip. Please don't forget what you were about to say.
Mm-hmm.
So a screwdriver, you're stabbed with the screwdriver, and it scrapes your skull.
No, it didn't scrape my skull. It punctured my skull.
It
And
punctures
the
your
reason
skull.
why, I say fortunately, because some years later, because during most of my incarceration, I was rather naive about a lot of things. Some years later, it dawned on me that if that screwdriver had penetrated my skeleton a few centimeters to the left or to the right, I may not have been here. The fact that it hit my skeleton saved my life. Again, I guess the pressure behind the screwdriver was so intense that upon hitting my skeleton, a piece of the metal, the tip of the screwdriver broke off and is still embedded in my head. So again,
Wow.
fortunately for me, it hit my skeleton, because if it had not, I think the least of my situation would have probably been a paraplegic, quadriplegic, or dead. But because it hit my skeleton, I'm here this evening talking to you.
So God was like, God was
Hey,
like,
all day long.
Wow.
yeah, yeah,
Hey, but I
okay.
didn't realize it, man. I didn't realize it because I was still naive. And at that time, and after most of the stabbings and the situations I've had while incarcerated, I was pounding my chest because I thought it was my doing. And then eventually, sometimes someone introduced me to the footprints in the sand, and I thought about that, and it dawned on me, that's my story, that's my life, that's my existence. Again, I was stabbed 2 other times after that. I was stabbed in the Maryland House Correction, Jessup, the Cut, where me and the guy, upon having some disagreements, we began to stab. Well, actually, I took some drugs. I stole some drugs from him, and eventually we ended up stabbing each other in the dorm. After that, I was placed on segregation or the hole, and while in the hole on segregation, 2 of his friends attempted to burn me up in my cell. Once again, I was carried. I just had no clue. The last time I was stabbed, it was in 1981 in Hagerstown, Maryland. While on lockup, once again, I got stabbed with a welding rod, and the guy stabbed me one time and ran. I chased him. I kind of anticipated that situation. So I had a lock in a sock, and I chased him until I simply collapsed. But I had a punctured lung, a damaged spleen, and had internal bleeding.
Wow.
And yeah, I'm blessed to be here.
Pastor Tay, what's going through your mind, brother?
One, you said Jessup Cuts, and I'm from Jessup, and I'm just thinking, wow. But nevertheless, the fact that you went through all that is crazy. I guess I would say, at what point, through those 3 instances, where it was like, you say you were kind of like, what did you say? You say you were kind of like, not ignorant, but you said you were kind of like fully yourself. At what point in those 3 instances where God really humbled you? You know what I mean? Like, you went to jail and all these things happened. Was there like a certain point where you had that experience with Jesus and be like, man, I need to humble myself, do my time, and try to make this change?
Yeah, well, you know what? It wasn't during my incarceration, because all during my incarceration, and after I came home in September, for the first time, September 21st, 1987, over the next 20 years, I was incarcerated an additional 10 years. And I still didn't get the message. I really recognized God's presence when my mother passed in 1991.
Wow.
Man, the most traumatic situation that has ever occurred to me in my life. I had no idea what to do, what I was going to do with myself, how I would react, how I would respond to the passing of my mother. Fortunately, I had a few people, pretty much real friends, that reached out to me at that time. And I still remember a friend of mine, Pastor Mike Robinson. He and I were incarcerated one time. He was one of the guys when I was down, and Jesse was trying to get me to come to church and that kind of thing. But at that time, I was still chasing drugs, drinking wine, and that kind of stuff. So I wasn't interested. But at my mother's funeral, he reminded me, he said to me, and this stuck with me. He told me, said, man, God does not put things in your life to break you, but to bend you. Well, he used the term us. He said, God does not place things in our lives to break us, but in order to bend us towards him. At the time he told me that at my mother's funeral, I didn't hear it. Sometimes later, that light came on, and all of a sudden I understood. But I also understood that was my life. God was carrying me all those years that I was going through what I was going through, still pounding on my chest. And it dawned on me, it wasn't my doing that I survived all those things. God had carried me all that time.
Yeah, yeah. That's, I mean,
Wow.
there's so much in what you just shared.
Right.
Um, you know, you know, big homie, what you thinking down there, brother? I mean, I know you're just sort of, you're like the rest of us, just kind of listening, just taking it in, right?
Most definitely. I mean, obviously, God has hand on you as far as just everything from, I mean, obviously the screwdriver stuff, I mean, but you realize stabbing's more than a knife, and obviously it's traumatic with that, but still, um, just so much that can happen.
Right.
So
Yeah.
this thing don't like me. Won't
So once, I'm
Yeah, go
sorry.
ahead, please. Okay. No, go
Yeah,
ahead.
once, and I'm sorry for the passing of your mother. I definitely can relate. My mom actually, I just put my mom to rest. What,
Man,
not too
my
long ago, a couple days
condolences,
ago.
man.
But
Mm.
so once that happened, was that like the turning point? Did you end up going back to prison, or was that like that was the time you kind of straightened up everything? Like, what was like? Can you explain maybe the last time, like when you got out of jail, and what that shift was like, and what and how did you draw closer to God during that shift?
But you know what? My criminal activities actually didn't pick up until after my mother passed. I came home in 1987. My mother passed in 1991. And
Mm-hmm.
that's when I began all over again my criminal activities. The one thing I was determined not to do, I was determined not to take my family through what they had gone through again in 1973. Again, my family had never experienced anything like that. You know, police all in the house, guns drawn. They were out in the backyard with weapons and guns I had never seen before in my life. But not only did I experience that, and I earned that. I earned that right to go through that. But my family didn't. And I did not want them to go through that again, ever in life. So again, my criminal activity began to pick up in 1991 after my mother passed.
Mm.
Wow. I mean, so yeah, so I'm thinking, I'm listening to what you're saying, and there's so many
Mm,
people, I think parents especially, right, who are like, that sounds like my child. Like I'm praying for my child. I want my child to get better.
mm.
I just want them to do better, and it seems like they just continue to do the same thing over. He's back in jail again, or he's been there for 50 years, or you know, I think this is a question similar to what Pastor Tate asked earlier, but I think a little different in that I'm wondering. you talked a lot about how your heart breaks for some of the young folks who are out here today experiencing exactly what you went through. If you go back to all of those things, because obviously being stabbed didn't change you right away. You were stabbed multiple times on multiple occasions. So it wasn't like, oh, I'm stabbed, let me get my life together. Um the the cops being in your yard, right, and surrounding your house, and even putting your family's life in danger, maybe shift a little bit, but it still didn't change you, right, to the point where you're going, okay, let me stop all that I'm doing. Was there anything that could have been said differently? Was there something that someone could have said to you, or do you feel like it's something you had to experience, something you had to live through to get to the place you are now?
Well, I definitely believe that. Your last statement, I definitely believe that. I personally believe that everything that we encounter during the course of our lives lead us to this very moment. I believe that's my situation. I also believe that if anything had been different in my life, there's no telling what the results would have been. One thing I do know for a fact, either because or despite the things I've gone through, here I am this evening speaking with you. So again, in my mind, there's a tremendous blessing in that. As far as young people, man, you know what, man? My last couple of incarcerations, I seen a number of them young men come into prison, and a lot of them weren't prepared for it. A lot of them weren't prepared for it. And subsequently, they pretty much were consumed by their environment. That's the prison environment. Because as you can pretty much assume, there's a lot of things that goes on in those prisons. And unfortunately, man, for a lot of them young men, man, they aren't prepared for it. And the crazy thing is, I encountered a number of them young people, man, and it broke my heart. Because these young men were 17, 18, and 19 years old with 90 years, life in 20, life in 50 sentences. And what dawned on me upon talking to one day, we were sitting in the TV room, and I was talking to this young man about his incarceration and the things he possibly could do to try to stay out of harm's way. A McDonald's commercial came on, and they were advertising the fish sandwich. And for a moment, my attention went towards the TV and the fish sandwich. And I thought to myself, man, I can't wait until I get home. Get me a McDonald's fish sandwich. Then my focus went back to the young man I was speaking to. And then it dawned on me the amount of time he had. It also dawned on me that perhaps he would never be able to enjoy a McDonald's fish sandwich. And the crazy thing is, man, I guess it's sort of a defense mechanism. We'll find ourselves in a perilous or outrageous, crazy situation, and we attempt to make the best of it. Man, I see again, man. It's a lot of times when I think about it, and some of the things I've actually witnessed happen to some of these young guys, it brings tears to my eyes. And I was fortunate. I was blessed once again. I didn't go through a lot of things, but I definitely experienced a number of other things, and being stabbed and attempt to be burned up. I still remember being in the Baltimore Penitentiary and some guys had thrown a flammable fluid, because that's what they were throwing on guys. If you wanted to burn somebody up, they had this flammable fluid that they would use in the bookbinding shop to bind books together. And I was in the Baltimore Penitentiary from 1976 to 1977. Just prior to my leaving, I witnessed two guys being burned up in their cell. And I still remember vividly, the officer explained to a number of us how they looked after the fire, after they eventually were able to unlock the cell door. And they had to shovel them guys out of their cell because they had been burned to a crisp. But I still remember, because I lived a few tiers under them, I still remember the burning flesh, their burning flesh. and that definitely left an impression. Um,
You, I man, this is a night, and I appreciate. Let me just again tell you how much I appreciate you for being here with us. I don't know that people really ever get or feel like they get this in type of in-depth conversation, and I want you to know that it is critical. It is important. For those again who are just joining, I saw some other names come up. We're talking to Samuel Buggs, who was our speaker at the Justice event that Anna, Josie, and Matt led on the fourth Sunday. Samuel Buggs is talking to us about his incarceration period. He's 65 now. He went to jail his first time to prison. He was 16 years old, and he has talked about being stabbed with a screwdriver, and his skull is what saved his life. He's talked about people being burned in the cells above him to no end, to ashes almost. He's talked about the life of prison, being his house surrounded by cops and them coming in and taking him away. He's talked about admitting to the armed robbery that he did, and yet some kind of way he also admits that God has still saved him time after time after time after time after time. God has still been there with him. That is the conversation we're having this evening. I just want to catch people up to that. Um, so Matt, what can you kind of just share with people the reason you had brought Samuel in for the Justice Sunday that we had, the Justice Encounter?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, firstly, because he's got a wonderful story, and I think he's ready to step out and share it. But one of the things that Sam and I have become pretty good friends over the past couple of years, and we talked a lot about the U.S. justice system, and Sam was a huge part of my journey in understanding kind of what's wrong with the system. I kind of 2015 we first met, probably 2015, 2016.
yeah.
I was like sort of vaguely aware that there was this mass incarceration thing, but didn't really know much about it. And hearing from an older black man, there's this systemic racism embedded, there's all of these issues that are kind of like really helped me on my journey to understand, the mess that we've created. And so one of the reasons I wanted to invite Sam to share part of the Justice Brunch was a lot of our conversations led me to the conclusion that the system that we have is utterly defunct. It does not work. Well, let me rephrase that. It does what it's meant to do, which is warehouse black and brown bodies, but it does not do what it claims to do, which is actually keep us safe and protect us from harm. And part of that was, we've heard Sam describe the harm that came to him in prison. Like, if prison is a place where people are supposed to go and change, like if there's more violence in prison than there is in the community, people coming home to the community are not going to be, are going to actually have experienced, come back worse than they went in. So the reason that I invited Sam was that he's got that perspective on like this doesn't work, and we want to understand what are the other ways to do it. Why this isn't working, and how do we move forward. So that was why I was excited for him to come, and why I was excited for him to share St. Ike's. Like, this is, when we talk about our legal system, we're talking about people. Like, yes, people may have done, an armed robbery is not a pleasant crime, right? I think you'd be willing to admit that, holding someone up at gunpoint is not a pleasant experience for them. But there are two people involved in that interaction. And if we lose sight of the humanity of either one of them, then we do immense lasting harm to our society, I think. And that's one of the big concerns with this conversation around Jesus in jail is like, Jesus is in jail because people are in jail. Like, Jesus is where the people is. And the people may have done terrible things, but that doesn't automatically make them terrible people, unworthy of love and care. In fact, they may be the people that need it most. They're the ones that frankly Jesus flocked to.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, I think I'm thinking like, yeah, you're right, man. And so when I think about the fact that there are people in jail who are witnessing, who are getting stabbed like you did, and let me be clear, right? Armed robbery is a horrible thing to do. I think you admit that, right? However, right, does that not require grace? And I want to make sure we as believers understand we are supposed to have grace for everything because Jesus has grace over everything as well. It does not mean that people don't deserve to do a time or whatever, but there is a grace. And so, do I think that that should have ever put you in a place where you're being stabbed multiple times? No. Do I think that that puts you in a place where you're smelling the decay of burning dead bodies, live bodies? No. And so oh, when you're while you're in that situation, and we talk about Matt wanting to bring you in about talking about the systematic issues that we have. Samuel is someone who has been through the system. I like to hear from you because you admit I did the crime, right? I did the crime, and so there is time that I should do. But how do you also agree that there is systematic oppression? I like to hear from you. What makes you think that there is systematic oppression?
Well, I mean, it's obvious. I mean, it's gotten to the point, man, we can no longer lie to ourselves, to other people about the conditions and the situations that exist in this country, especially when it relates to people of color, man. As Matt has stated, I can surely testify to the fact that, man, our prison system, our justice system is broken. It is broken. As you has stated, man, oftentimes people go into prison and they come out much worse than they were than they when they originally went in. You know, so I learned a lot of these increased. I learned how to rob banks, and there may be some people somewhere after my mother passed that may insinuate, but just like a lot of people realize, man, prisons become a cesspool of all the ills of our society. And those people are forced together to live, survive, and exist. In those situations, oftentimes, once again, you'll learn a lot of things that you had no knowledge of prior to. And that was my situation. And that's why after my mother had passed, my criminal activities picked up. And yeah, but you know what? One of the things, there's many reasons why I do what I do. And I as Matt well knows, I do this quite a bit, exposing my history, my life story, because in my mind, the only way I can make any sense out of what I've been through and what I've done is try to prevent someone else from going through what I went through.
Mm.
It isn't necessary. By the time a lot of young people realize that they don't want to be incarcerated, it's too late. It's too late. So I mean, I live in Jubilee Housing up in Adams Morgan, and there have been a few people that have come home from incarceration that eventually landed within Jubilee Housing. Jubilee also has a reentry program for people coming home from incarceration, and I share my story as often as I can to not only the young people in my neighborhood, my community, but with other former incarcerated people, man, because sometimes we'll go through a tragic situation, and sometimes it's not enough. Sometimes we have to go through those situations 2 or 3 times before we finally get the picture. And that was my story. But man, the only way, once again, that I think that I can balance what I've gone through is, once again, man, to be able and willing to assist those that are confronted with the same issues that I was confronted with. I still believe that peer pressure is a big obstacle for a lot of people. Pastor, I'm sorry, I was shaking your head. You had a question?
Yeah, yeah, no. I'm with you. I was also shaking my head. Somebody was speaking on the computer. I wanted before you keep going. I do want to stop. You said I want to go back to something you said. You said when you go to jail, you were there with a whole, but you were compiled with a whole bunch of other people. I like to use imagery, so it sounds like you're saying you're just compiled with a whole bunch of other bodies of people who are just in this box. And
Mm.
you said I learned more at times in jail about the criminal life than I did on the streets.
Yeah.
And I want to pause there because we're talking about that we moved into this, we segued into this systematic oppression, this systematic structure that I don't think people understand. And we don't talk about enough in this country, but we don't talk about jail reform, reformation, right? We don't talk about prison reformation. We don't talk about those things, but you know, people don't understand. Prison is owned by private, a lot of times by private people, right? And so private funding, and so people are getting rich. People are
Yeah.
getting rich continuously off of the lives of especially black and brown people who are sent to jail, and no one cares. So I want to make sure that we pause on that because there are people who go, you need to send them to prison. You just need to send them all to jail. But I need people to understand when you say that, I want you to hear from the person who has lived a lot of his life, if not half of his life, behind bars. He's saying to you that when you write them off and send them to those prisons that are funded by private money, you were
Mm-hmm.
saying send them off to a place that nobody cares about them, that there is not that much hope for them to be reformed, right? And they're just in there learning more and more about how to survive in a criminal based territory. There's not and I want to ask this question: do you feel like you got mental health help in there? Do you feel like people pushed you to get help and resource, or was it just like, if you take it, you take it. If you don't, you don't?
Yeah, well, you know what, man? I think it's important. A lot of people, a lot of psychiatrists kind of create a correlation between those that have been incarcerated and those that have been in actual wars. I mentioned earlier about being crammed. Just to give you an example of that, I was in the Maryland House of Correction, the Cut in 1981. I was housed in a dormitory. It was H dormitory. You had 145 men in cage in this wide open area. Correctional officers were safely outside of that cage. So you had 145 guys left to their own devices. And it wasn't anything, and that's eventually where me and the guy eventually ended up stabbing each other. But there was nothing unusual to wake up 2, 3 o'clock in the morning and see a guy being stabbed. Actually, the first day I came to the Maryland House of Correction, we come in there with our baggage and with the correctional officer. And right there, as we entered the H dormitory, two guys are stabbing this guy. And they continued to stab him until they eventually got tired. Three of the guys decided they didn't want to go in there. Fortunately for me, a number of guys that was in H dormitory at that time, I had known from the Baltimore Penitentiary. But man, you left to your own device. I mean, you are pretty much on your own. Um, and that's the way it is, man. It's strictly about housing. They don't care how crowded, overcrowded they don't care. I still remember being in some detention centers, and it was so crowded. You may have a space, maybe 12 by 15 or something like that, and you got 6 people in that one little area. You got mattresses on the floors, they up under the bunks, and all of that stuff. Because man, once you get on that side of the fence, and that's the fence of incarceration, a lot of people don't care.
Yeah, and I think it's also worth pointing out that like when you were housed in, it was when you were in Maryland, right, where you were
Mm.
working for the big companies
Yeah.
for like cents on the dollar, like to the oppression point, right? Like you were making what, couple of cents an hour to make furniture and stuff.
Yeah. It was Matt is speaking about again, when I was in the Baltimore Penitentiary, I was fortunate enough to work in the wood shop. And I say fortunate enough working in the wood shop because the wood shop was one of the jobs where guys made, like, I think at that time, maybe like $60 a month. Guys working in the kitchen, they would only earn something like $20, $25 per month. So that job in the wood shop was a desirable job. But once I got in there, I seen the type of furniture that we was making, and this furniture is uh, all the top flight furniture made right in prisons. But it dawned
Wow.
on me a number of years, man, prisons become big business in the United States. You mentioned about privatized prisons being built all over the country. I still remember reading an article. This is probably about 1990 something. The state of New York was trying to entice this company to build a prison within the state of New York. The governor at that time guaranteed that that prison would be filled, and they haven't even begun building it yet. And one of the things I found so disturbing was how in the world can somebody predict that a building that has not been built yet will be filled? But that's the nature of our justice system. It has become such a money making process, incarceration. You do them. I mean, it's not easy to figure out. If it is, if tens or hundreds of millions of dollars are made from the labor of men and women in prisons, what are the chances you think of people trying to shut it down? Very unlikely. Very unlikely.
Yeah.
Wow.
Um, tell you how you got to put. I mean, I can still go on. I just want you to
Yeah.
pause and just.
Yeah, I just think it's crazy. I'm blown, but nevertheless, getting back onto the, I guess, Jesus in jail. I
Mm.
guess while you were in jail, did you have the ability to seek a relationship with Christ? And if so, was it something that was encouraged, or was it just something as Ray say, if you want it, here it is. If you don't, go about your business. And
Yeah,
um
as I
and
said.
also, no, I'm sorry.
I'm
Go ahead.
excuse me. No, go ahead.
And also, I would also ask another question. You can kind of answer them in tandem, however you want. If you look back at your 16-year-old self, and you look at, I guess, the 16-year-olds, now, do you think church can help them? Do you think church would have helped you? Because I know you said you went to church every Sunday, but do you think there was something the church could have done when you were 16? And do you think there's something the church can do for the youth right now that they're not doing?
Like everybody, man, we're all looking for something. There are a lot of young
Hmm.
people out there looking for something also. And unfortunately, because haven't been able to locate or find something that would be nourishing to their spirits, we see them hanging on the corners. We see them out in the streets selling drugs. If there was some way to allow them to completely understand the consequences. And then one of the things that bothers me about all of this shooting and stuff, every time I hear about a little kid being killed, I almost break out. I get so emotional, I cry a lot of times because I
Hmm.
understand that young little boy, that little girl that was killed. You're you're probably erasing 2 or 3 generations
Mm.
of people that look like us. And I wondered oftentimes, do them young people understand the significance of their actions? And I wonder, but they need help, man. They need guidance. But so many people have become so afraid because of a number of things that they're doing. A number of people are afraid to connect or try to contact or communicate with them. But because
Hmm.
of that, we all eventually end up suffering.
It's so
We got
crazy, man,
to find a
because
way somehow, some way to reach out, man, to reach a lot of them young people, some way, somehow.
yeah, yeah. I'm listening to you, man. I think I always say there is hope. There is hope,
Hmm.
and I always like to leave people with hope. Here's the hope. So at 65, you're now 65, and you were incarcerated first at 16. You've been in and
Hmm.
out and incarcerated since then. But at 65, right? At 65, you are now sharing your story and your testimony to enlighten other people and to bring people to the light. So there is hope. And I
Hmm.
think that's the piece that I want people to walk away from. But I want you to feel kind of dumb. They say church is not about always making people feel good. And so I'm not trying to bend it to make people feel good. I
Hmm.
do want there's a two-edged sword here. I want people to clearly hear that there is hope, because Samuel now is a man who is out here, a decent man, making a decent living and really trying to inspire others not to go down the path that he went. And so God showed up, and God changed Samuel's life through through other people, through people who have poured into him, and through prayers that came through over the years. But I also want people to hear and be frustrated. I want you to be frustrated enough to do something different, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the church, and listen, I'm not here to give the church a bad rap. There are plenty of churches that I know Pastor Tate, some of the churches he was with did prison
Kairos
ministry.
ministry.
And so there are churches that are doing this, and so this is not against the whole of the church. But I want to make a plea to the people of the church, right? Not this isn't even about the building. This is about the people. If you call yourself a Christian, I met with some people as I've walked through the city on this Homey campaign. I've heard people who complain, this is not right. This ain't right. The kids ain't doing this. Blah, 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 blah. And I oftentimes wonder, right? What are you doing? Right? Like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? Because, and again, I know oftentimes, even sometimes on this encounter, we could talk about the church as a whole. The church isn't doing it. But I want to move. I don't want to do that. I want to focus on the individuals. And I hope that you will share this on your pages. I hope you will send this encounter to your friends. I hope you will send this encounter to your churches and say, we've got to watch this together, right? I implore you to do that. I beg you. That's the first step, is sitting down and listening to testimonies like Samuel's, right, together. Is a church, is a community, is a family. Again, I want to implore you, if you have watched this on YouTube or Facebook, or if you're watching the rewatch, I want to implore you to say, you know what? My first step is I'm going to sit down with my family and we're going to watch this together. I'm going to ask my pastor if we can watch this together. And then I want you to feel so moved by the horrendous stories of what Samuel has shared as he went through prison, by the horrendous stories of what privatization of jails and prisons look like. I want you to be so moved by that your conversation shifts from, let's just send them to jail, they need to be locked up and in jail, to, how do we prevent people from going through what Samuel has gone through? Because no human being should ever have to walk through that type of life and be exposed to that sort of stuff. We're getting close to the close, but Samuel, I do want to ask you this question. Do you ever think you'll be able to mentally get over the things that you've seen, the stuff you've been through? Do you ever think that there's a place that you can mentally move that out of your head? The stuff you've seen, the fact that you've been stabbed over and over again, the fact that you've seen human bodies burn while they were alive, the fact that you've witnessed beatings, brutal beatings in the place that was supposed, as Danny says up here, from the place that was supposed to reform you and rehabilitate you, it instead it exposed you to things you should have never seen. Do you think you'll ever be able to walk past the mental trauma that you've been through?
I can't imagine it. All the things that I've encountered in my life has become a part of me. And I'm here, sitting here at this very moment, either because of those things or despite those things. I haven't quite figured out which is which, but I do realize that I'm blessed in all of that. You know, and that's why I feel a great desire to do what I can, once again, to aid people, young people in particular. Man, there has to be a better way. There has to be a better way. And you don't have to go through what I went through. It's not necessary. This is necessary. But you know what? Those of us that know have to take on the responsibilities of doing what we can to avert, to aid, to assist those young people. If we don't want to be within that arena, we need to stop complaining about the things they do and don't do. Because if you're on a part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, what an encouraging story. What a story that has.
It's
I mean, if you don't
amazing.
feel, yeah, if you don't feel something after that, brother, I can't thank you enough. I just want to go around, Matt. If you had to share in close, and Danny, Danny's going to be on here next week, I believe it is. Danny, I can't wait to talk a lot about your stories and what you've been through. Matt, if you could just summarize what you're feeling just in this moment, what would that be?
Um, I think I think it makes me, it makes me think that, like, as a church, we have often, the church, big picture, has often been responsible for either pushing or being ambivalent towards systems of harm and oppression. Um, you know, Throughout American history, whatever point you want to pick, the church has either been on the wrong side or mostly ambivalent. And I think this is a moment where we can right that. I think there is space for the church to be able to say, look, there's a way to hold people accountable that doesn't cause harm. And I think if the church can be at the forefront of that, I think that can be pretty radical for people to see. And yeah, I'm just really grateful to Sam. Thank you for sharing so much.
Oh, thank you. And man, hey, you know what? I just want to say this though. In speaking tonight, I wasn't attempting to glamorize incarceration or crime or anything like that. The only reason I'm willing to expose myself and tell my story, it allows me to think better of myself.
Hmm.
And again, there's nothing that you can do with being incarceration, crime, and all of that stuff. There's no real rewards behind that. I get my pleasures. I get my good feelings when I do something that I know that is helpful and beneficial to someone else without any strings attached.
Hmm.
And that's why I'm willing to tell my story. That's why I'm willing to expose myself. That's why I'm willing to answer any questions that anybody may have to ask me. Because I really I like to see some changes. I like to see some changes, man. But the thing is, if not me, if not you, if not you, who else?
Hmm.
Who else?
Yeah.
But I think I take it on as an obligation, man. I have to do something to justify, not necessarily justify, but to kind of right my wrongs.
Mm.
And although I definitely can't undo the things I've done in the past, I can possibly soften the blow.
Hmm.
And one other question: I have mental health, man. I tell you, I have a psychiatrist.
Mm.
Yeah, I have mental health issues because of my incarceration experiences. And man, anybody that hears me, man, there's nothing wrong with seeking help.
Mm.
My mental health situation, my having psychiatrists and being in mental health programs. Actually, I stayed in a Patuxent institution, which is down in Jessup, which is a mental health institution. I stayed there 4.5 years. But out of all the places that I've been, that has truly been the most rewarding because in there I received individual and group counseling and therapy. And it definitely allowed me to see a lot of things that I was unable to see prior to.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Mm.
I appreciate that comment. I appreciate it so much. Big homie, I'm going to ask you to do a poem for us as we close out in just a second. Pastor Tay, any final words or thoughts that you'd like to share, brother?
Yeah, man, Sammy, I'm just so blessed for your testimony because you put a face to what is really happening. You know what I mean? You put a face to it. I mean, as you said, you watch things like The Wire and everything else, and they glamorize armed robbery. We glamorize going to jail. We hear about a rapper going to jail, getting out on bail, or we see it in TV. And you know, and I mean this in the best way possible. You are the example of that. Like this is what can happen when you do wrong, but this is also what can happen when you learn from your mistakes and start to do right. So it just shows, you know, people make mistakes, yes, but you know, you can overcome from that. But also, it's not fun. You know, life is not a music video. It's not a rap song. And I just love your testimony and your transparency. And I just wish you all success, brother.
Hey, one last thing, if I may, and I was thinking about what you said, Pastor Tay. We have a tendency in our neighborhoods, and I'm talking about most African American low income neighborhoods. We have a tendency of glamorizing people that we see in those neighborhoods, and that's normally the guys that's selling dope, you know, the guys that's committing crimes, and all that other things. Those people are glamorized in our neighborhoods because for a lot of people in those neighborhoods, those are the only people that they see. So we aspire to become them because they have the things we think that we may want. And subsequently, a lot of people subsequently become incarceration and become deceased because of that. We have to change the narrative. We have to find some way, somehow, to change the narrative in those neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Love it.
Brother Samuel, I can't thank you again for just your time, man. I pray that you are richly blessed. I pray that God continues to guide you
I
and to
am.
lead you. And I pray that God continue to hold you and keep you because you are necessary. And I pray that you understand how necessary and valuable you are. You are gold. I mean, you are diamond, man. And we need you. We need you. And so I pray that the doors of opportunity continue to open for you, not just because I believe that you need to continually know how valuable you are to God and how much God loves you, because I am sure, if nothing else, that God loves you and cherishes you, and I know that God values you because you are valuable to God. But then I pray that you are the light to so many others who are living in darkness in dark times, because people need to hear your testimony. They need to hear your story, because one of the things I want to make sure people understand is that one of the things I heard from you is that testimony that you have proves that there is still purpose in you, proves that there is still value to you, proves that God still has a plan for your life, even at 65. And so I
Yeah.
hope that people hear that no matter where they are in life, no matter what they've done, no matter what they failed to do, God's grace has covered you and it can cover them just as
No
well.
doubt.
We do this because we are the unchurched church, and so many times church does not always show the realness behind the stories, and we want to make sure we're always bringing the realness. So if that's you, and then you've watched this program, you've been a part of this conversation, then I ask that you take the moment and consider what changing your life looks like. All the stuff you've been to and all the stuff you've heard, this encounter, right, has proven to you or has talked to you and spoken to you to share with you, hey, we can be Christian. It doesn't matter what you did. How many times you went to jail, how many times you did whatever, how many armed robberies you did, how many people you shot, how many people you stabbed. I don't let anybody tell you that you are not worth the living.
Right.
You have listened to someone who has done it. You have listened to someone who has watched it and he is still giving God praise. That could be you. That could be you. And so I hope that you are inspired by this testimony and that you want a relationship. And if that's you, don't hesitate to reach out to the well. Don't hesitate to reach out to us. Don't hesitate to DM us. We are always willing to pray with you. We're always willing to talk with you. There are all sorts of us, Pastor Tay, myself, Matt, Pastor Harrison, Nikki, all those folks. We're all willing to have that conversation. So please reach out and let us know. In lieu of time, I'm not going to go over all the stuff we usually end with. You can always go to our social media, which is all under Encounter the Well. both Facebook and Instagram. And if you like to know more about the well, you can go there. If you like to give, there are plenty of ways to give. You can do that there. But I want to yield for just a second. I know Big Homey, who is our featured artist of the month, did not have a chance earlier to finish his spoken word, and I hope he didn't freeze yet again. Cause okay, there he is. So Big Homie, I'm gonna ask that if you could just do it, just one spoken word piece for us tonight to end this off, and then when we come back next week, we're gonna open up that portal for you to do a couple more. I do realize that our time, and I'm so sorry. I know that you are in the car and you were down in Virginia, and I know the service probably is kind of going crazy over there. But could you just give us one big
No, we
one?
in the city. We gotta just do something that'll be so I can be great. So
Absolutely.
if you didn't hear anything, if you didn't hear any of the stuff from before, I'll try to put on the social media. I'll try to do this short thing that will encompass everything. If anything, Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope in the future. Hope. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and his righteousness. You see, this hope is all that I have. When I have to think of when all hope is gone, I have to remember my hope is built. My hope is to encourage someone who does not know Christ. My hope is so in darkness someone can see light. I hope because I cannot put my trust in man. I hope in Christ because he knows my plan. I hope because I know I have an expected end. I hope in Christ because my broken heart he mends. I hope so I can make it through the day. I hope because there's a debt I cannot repay. God so loved the world that a blessed hope was given. Christ was born, he was crucified, and now he's risen. Whenever someone tries to steal my joy, I hope. I remember that I'm Abba's baby boy, and I hope. Whenever I'm down and I'm feeling weak, I hope. In my secret place, his face I seek. I need to hope. The faith is the substance of things hoped for. The evidence is not seen. The main reason why I place my hope in Christ is that he is my everything. I hope so I can give hope to others. I hope so I can speak life to my sisters and brothers. The life of Christ is the blessed hope and why I live. So if Christ is hope and he brings life, he is who I give.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. What a great night. Big Homie is our featured artist for the rest of the month. You will see so much more of him on our social media. You'll also see him on the next two encounters as well. Pastor Tay, thank you. Matt, you're brilliant. Thank you for bringing on this amazing and anointed brother. Samuel, we love you so much here at the Well. We hope that you'll continue to have a relationship with us as we move forward. To all of the Wellians out there, we love you. And there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. Keep with us this month because we've got some great stuff coming up. Ghetto Jesus next Thursday. We'll see you then.
I applaud all of you. Let's go. Yeah, thank you, man. Man, I tell you.